Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Nomaen Opinion, the segment on this channel where I wrap up my thoughts on the game I just finished, going over the story, core gameplay loop, and overall presentation through its world building and art direction, finishing the review with a tier list style placement compared to the other games I've played on the channel up to this point. Up for review this time is 2016's I Am Setsuna. Developed by Tokyo RPG Factory, a subsidiary of Square Enix, and being published by Square Enix as well, Tokyo RPG Factory was founded to create games that likened back to the RPG Golden Era, taking inspiration from their own series such as Final Fantasy or Chrono Trigger. I Am Setsuna fits the goal of a strong, story-driven RPG that feels reminiscent of the NES or SNES classics, while still melding some of the nuances of modern-day game design. That being said, let's jump into arguably the strongest aspect of the game, the story. Our story opens with our protagonist, Endir, a man hailing from a tribe of masked mercenaries, known for their strength in battle. He is tasked with saving a kidnapped girl from a monster, and once the job is done, he is given another task, to find a girl preparing for the sacrificial pilgrimage and kill her. He of course accepts, and sets off for his target. Once he finds her, he discovers that she is the sacrifice herself. In this world, monsters constantly attack the humans, threatening their very existence. The only way to appease these monsters is to send off a sacrifice, doing so every few years. Without the sacrifice, the monsters grow stronger and more aggressive, until they eventually destroy what humanity remains. Understanding that his target is going to die anyways, Endir puts down his blade and agrees to join Setsuna, protecting her on her journey. The group sets off, joined by Eterna, a friend of Setsuna's, on their way to the Last Lands, the final destination for all sacrificial pilgrimages. Along the journey, they run into all sorts of roadblocks, ranging from traitorous rulers to just a strong monster, or even a village under attack and ill-equipped to handle the monsters. And through the efforts of the team, and Setsuna's unwavering want to help the less fortunate despite her circumstances, they are able to help countless people and have a few of them join for their journey as well. Such as Nadir, an older warrior who failed in protecting the pilgrimage he was tasked with guarding, or Kerr, a young magically gifted person whose life expectancy is drastically cut due to just how strong the magic is within him, or Julienne, a princess of a long-forgotten empire. While the characters may not initially have a reason to join Setsuna on this journey, their motivations tend to line up after they realize the potential Setsuna offers. Wikipedia cites that sadness, or sorrow, is a core theme to the overall story of the game, and I couldn't agree more. From the moment that you realize what Endir is tasked with, you are hit with the feeling that this story may not end happily. Knowing that the goal of the pilgrimage is to see your target to her own death, while seeing her stay positive throughout the journey, helping those in need even if it puts herself at risk, it pulled at my heart quite a bit and helped me get attached to these characters. It helps that the writing is quite strong throughout this narrative. While the core story is quite simple, the interactions between the cast help cover the shortcomings of the plot. While the vast majority of the dialogue is serious and plot relevant, there are some light-hearted moments to help break up the doom and gloom. These can range from Kerr calling Nadir an old man, a gambling addict trying to make bets right next to his disapproving wife, or even a concerned parent of a guard. These moments happen frequently enough to help alleviate the seriousness of the story, but don't directly shatter the tone of what the writers were going for, only helping to give this world a better sense of realism. I Am Setsuna, despite or maybe in light of being a tragedy, is a wonderful story. It takes itself just seriously enough to follow through with the appropriate tone from start to finish, while understanding the smaller subtleties that help build a world that feels believable. While I could continue to praise the writing of this game, without spoiling anything, I would just be repeating the same type of compliments. So let's move on to the gameplay. I Am Setsuna is a standard ATB-based RPG. Think Final Fantasy IV or Chrono Trigger. You have a party of 3 in combat with a total of 7 potential party members. Battles are not randomly generated, instead being visible on the map and leaving it to the player's initiative to engage. This is a nice change from the tired random battle systems from older RPGs, and while every few steps do tend to have an encounter, you aren't required to fight them unless you want XP and money. You are not able to swap party members mid-battle, so the lack of random fights may have been impacted by that decision. But as you might expect, you are able to just mash basic attack if you really want to. But utilizing spells and abilities alongside unique combos between your party members is much more efficient. These combos and abilities are dependent on having the right Sprit Knight equipped, similar to materia from Final Fantasy VII or badges from Paper Mario. This allows for on-the-fly build adjustments or reactive changes to your lineups if a boss is giving you trouble. Combos work based off of if the Sprit Knight is equipped and the corresponding characters are in the lineup, combining up to 3 abilities into one stronger attack, often adding extra damage and effects to the attack at the cost of the user's combined turns. These combos are very strong, giving distinct advantages to the player if used correctly, such as Blow Beat, a full board cleave that may stun, confuse, and paralyze the enemies. There are a ton of combos with varying levels of strength and utility. I really ever only used Blow Beat. It did a ton of damage and stunned the enemies, but that wasn't the only reason I primarily used just the one combo. While the Sprit Knight lists what combos it unlocks, it does not list the other abilities needed, nor is there an in-game list to reference unless you have already unlocked the combo. My point is, you need a guide to understand what abilities you need to see all of the different combos available. And while this isn't a new concept, it takes away from the immersion that the plot tries to develop. Figuring out these combos organically feels satisfying, but once you find one that deals with most situations, the system as a whole feels kind of trivial. In addition to abilities and combos, every action has an additional effect that can be triggered by spending MP, or momentum points. These points are earned when your action is ready, yet you wait to act. This can range from healing on attacks to extra ATB gauge, or just extra damage. Momentum is also earned by landing hits and taking damage, but is earned the most consistently through waiting. The system helps your basic combat feel a bit different, yet feels just clunky enough to be awkward. It's an attempt at addressing the aged combat system, yet I don't think it does enough to stand out. Trash fights feel unimportant, as most enemies evaporate in a couple attacks, while boss fights feel inconsistent at best. Some require thought behind your team comp and attack plans, yet others serve as overglorified damage sponges. One of my favorite bosses is the Auroran Tiger. About 2/3 of the way through the game, it is a rushdown fiend, getting 2 attacks in the time that your party gets 1 round. This beast took me a couple tries before realizing that I have to change my strategy. Once I adjusted my moves and party, it went down first try, and that was pretty gratifying. In the same breath though, many of the boss fights, including the final boss Gauntlet, were all exploitable through the same defensive strategy. Setting up Wall, which grants damage immunity up to a threshold, cast Slow to control the speed of the battle, and then deal damage when available, and then just repeat when all that wore off. While it can be gratifying to solve a tough boss encounter, when about 90% of the bosses serve as patience testers, these tougher fights feel out of place and detract from my overall enjoyment. Before you comment on me complaining about difficulty in an RPG, I'm not opposed to a harder, more strategy-focused combat. For me, the point of contention is the lack of consistency in difficulty. I would much rather the game be a bit tougher throughout, or consistently easier, than have random spikes in difficulty like this. This is a tough ask though, with the usual difficulty modifiers being just more damage or health, which can be circumvented with grinding. Overall, they wanted to make an RPG that feels like the games of old, and I'd say they were pretty successful, for better and for worse, often feeling dated from a combat perspective when narratively it excels. While the team behind this looked to the past for inspiration for the game, the world crafted for this tale feels wholly unique, consisting of a bleak, snow-covered world, cold caves, and an unending snowstorm. This world fits the more serious tones that the narrative tries to lay out. The overworld map feels empty. I would normally critique this as a negative, yet with the type of vibe being put out by the storytelling, this large empty world feels appropriate, with the only safe havens for humans consisting of the handful of villages. It makes sense for much of the world to be empty. These villages are pretty simple in design. They're often little more than a few houses in a tavern, populated by your standard NPCs. I will admit that despite blending together, these less than ideal towns help hammer in the point that the world is constantly just trying to survive. That is a problem I had throughout the entire game, that the levels all blended together, feeling too samey. This seems to have been an intended decision favoring a consistent world design over a more varied set of environments to help evoke the intended feelings in the player. While wrapping up the end of the game, I had decided to explore the world a bit more. Having unlocked the ability to fly after another overly difficult boss fight, I stumbled upon a mysterious island with a small rift in its forest. Taking the chance, I ventured forward and was greeted with a welcome surprise. The dev team had created a small village full of references to themselves, thanking the player for buying the game and making it this far. What made this village stand out even further was the fact that the area's whole aesthetic was based on pixel art, including the music, which had a chiptune sound font similar to the era this game is trying to reference. This was such a nice thing to find, helping break up the bleak world and depressing tone with something a bit lighter. Now, I do appreciate whatever intent was behind the cohesive world design, but I feel that it detracted from my overall enjoyment. I can only go through the same exact cave system so many times before it starts to feel cheapened, and this extends to the enemy design as well, often recycling the same few enemy designs every couple of levels. There is a decent amount of variation between enemy types, with bosses, as usual, having some of the better designs. The novelty of fighting a different colored penguin wears off after the 4th or 5th version. Now, for the trade-off to the obvious reuse of assets. This is a smaller scale game, only retailing for $40 USD, if not on sale. You're understanding that this is not comparable to something like Doom 2016 or Dishonored 2, both of which came out in the same year, helps explain some of the underwhelming shortcuts. I went into this game understanding that fact, so my personal expectations weren't missed by not having a tonally unique enemy cast. But if repetitive layouts and enemy designs are a negative for you, I totally understand. I've focused on the environments and enemies enough, and while those factors could be better, the soundtrack for this tale is a treat. Almost entirely composed of piano tracks, they add so much depth to the otherwise standard RPG cutscenes, ranging from softer pieces for some of the more emotionally intricate moments, to faster-paced songs that better fit the flow of combat. The music makes up such a large part of the overall experience in this game. I feel that it fits perfectly for what the story was going for, and only helps strengthen what could have been an otherwise very middle-of-the-road RPG. I Am Setsuna, a tale about sacrifice and the harsh realities of life, was a wonderful, albeit sad story. I personally love to play RPGs like this that are focused on telling a story and evoking emotions from the player that may not be available from your standard Twitch shooter. Saying that the combat was enjoyable is like saying grinding in Pokemon is fun. To most, it's just a tedious chore, but there are some that may find this to be a fun system. While the combat adds little new to the genre, it doesn't need to. This was an attempt to liken back to the old days of RPGs past, and if that was the goal, I feel like it succeeded. Telling such a tragic tale paired with the sometimes emotionally charged music helps create one of the stronger self-contained storylines I've played in a while. It takes itself just as seriously as needed, yet knows when to break up that seriousness in ways that help the player grow attached to the party. This is a hard game to place. Normally I'd put it around an A, but I think I personally enjoyed Indivisible just a little bit more than this game. I guess that leaves it as a high B, citing a strong story and stellar soundtrack, but lacking in environment and enemy diversity, plus the combat does feel dated, to no fault of the game's own. So, I wanted to end this video with a slight update to how my uploads will be in the future. While I enjoy the playthrough aspect of this channel, I personally feel like it would be better for the longevity and growth of this channel to focus on the review style content, maybe interjecting with some non-review video essay style projects. I doubt that at the time of this script's writing anyone will really be impacted or care about this change in upload pattern. The uploads are going to be less consistent, less frequent, but hopefully I'll be able to cover a few more games than what the current schedule has allowed. If there is anything you think that I might enjoy playing through, or just want to hear my thoughts on them, feel free to leave a comment about it. So for the next review, I've been struggling to figure out what I want to cover. I think I might stick with the RPG genre just for a little bit longer. Just this time, something a little bit more upbeat. So up next is Dodgeball Academia. Anyways, thanks for listening.